Hello, and welcome back to Youth Code Jam's online Bits and Bytes lessons. We're going to continue with our coding activities. Today's activity will be in Python, and it's called Code Detective. So because Python is a text-based language, we do recommend that students in 6th through 12th grade are the students that attempt this activity, just because they normally have more practice typing, so it will be a little easier for them. If younger students would like to try it out, they're of course welcome to. They may just need a little bit more help to get through it. We're going to only type 4 lines of code, and then everything after that will be pretty easy, so it might just be in this very beginning part that is a struggle. But besides that, the reason we're doing this activity is to learn about debugging code or fixing errors. Today's errors are all going to be syntax errors, maybe one logic error in there, but a syntax error occurs when something is typed wrong. So it's looking for a certain keyword, or a keyword is misspelled, or there's punctuation missing, or not used correctly, and that will shoot off an error that prevents the program from running until you fix it. So today we're mostly going to be testing that and learning what those errors look like and how to handle them. So the first thing I want you guys to do is open a browser window or a new tab in your browser and go to repl.it languages or \languages\python 3. And this is our online IDE. So what this does is it allows us to write programs and run them and test them and see what's going on, if they work or not. It's free. You can sign up for an account. We're not going to do that today. But this prevents us having to download anything for these short projects. So you can just go online and use this compiler to test out code. So a note before we get started, these kinds of things are built so that they try and make sure your code is correct. They try and help you out. So they'll auto-complete some punctuation for us. I want you to just ignore what it tries to do automatically, and I want you to copy, either if you're looking at the worksheet, copy exactly what's on the worksheet, or copy exactly what's on my screen as we go through that. So on line 1, I'm going to write a print command, and I'm going to delete the second double quote and just type a message here that we want to print to the console, or the screen in this case. Okay, and then we're going to hit enter and go to line 2 and print another statement. So my age is, and then we're going to have it do some math. So we're going to have 2020 minus 1990. And then we're going to do a third print statement. Pay attention to the details. And then our fourth print statement. Okay, so now that we have our 4 print statements, we're going to run our program. So we have some errors here we need to go back and look at, and that shows up over here. So what it's telling us on this line is that there's an error in file main.py, so in our main file, and it's on line 1, and then it prints that line 1 for us and says you can see what we have, print, there's an error here, can you fix it? And you see this little caret here? That's telling us the error is occurring right here somewhere. But if we're still not sure about what that is, or sometimes that caret's not going to show up, we can come down here. It's a syntax error, and that says EOL while scanning string literal. So that says it reached the end of line while scanning the string literal, which is our sentence here. A sentence is a string literal, and then encountered an error. So if you noticed, and you probably did, right, when you were working on this, when we tried to do the sentence, it automatically filled this in for us. We did print, and then, we did print, open parentheses, and it filled in this closing parentheses for us, and then we did a double quote, and it filled in the opening and closing double quotes. So whenever we use parentheses or quotes, they have to show in pairs, and they have to match. So what happened up here on line 1 is we have our open and closing parentheses, but we don't have our closing double quotes. We have the opening one here, and we have and we're missing one after the question mark. So we have to have that second double quote to tell it this is where the end of my data is that I'm sending to the print function. So we're going to go ahead and add that double quote there. And again, you'll see that it automatically tried to help you. In this case, it creates a second error. So delete that second double quote that appears and try to run the program again. Okay, so we fixed the first error in line 1 so that it read line 1, it said good. It hit line 2, we have another error. So on line 2, the error is saying it occurs right before the 2020. And our syntax error is invalid syntax. So this is because we're trying to combine or concatenate a literal string and an integer in the same print statement. To do this, we need punctuation. If you've worked in Java, you will typically see this done with the plus sign. In Python, after the string literal or between the two types of variables or the two types of data we're trying to combine, you're going to add a comma. So right after this double quote, I'm going to add a comma here. And that's going to say, okay, we're combining this string literal, my age is, with whatever the result of 2020 minus 1990 is. So let's go ahead and run our program again. All right, so we fixed line 2. It found an issue in line 3. And so it just says syntax error, end of line while scanning string literal. So what that means is that, again, it found an issue with reading that line, but what it doesn't tell you is there's actually 3 problems in this statement, and this is where this caret isn't accurate. So it says there's something here, but there's actually 2 more before it. So let's look at line 3. The first thing should be pretty obvious. We have a typo in our print function, so our print command doesn't work. So you need to click in between the R and the N and add an I. And so you can see it changed from black, which is just general text, or user-provided commands or something. So this black is normally used for user-defined variables or user-defined functions. So when we add the I, on my screen it changes to purple. On your screen it might change to blue. So that's telling it that we're using a built-in command in Python. The next thing happens right after that. Like I said before, we need opening and closing parentheses when we're using a function. So this is a function call. We're calling a function that exists in Python. We didn't have to make it, but we do have to use those parentheses around the data we're sending to the function. So come in after the T and before the first double quote, and you're going to add an open parenthesis. And then that very last one is the same thing we encountered on step 1. We need the closing double quotes after the exclamation point. Okay, so now let's try to run our program one more time. Oh, and it did that to me, I forgot. So it added that second double quote on line 3. So I'm going to fix that, delete the second one from behind, and now run the program. So now our program prints everything. And technically it's correct, but on line 4, if you had wanted to print the actual sum of 2 plus 2, which is 4, we didn't get that. So what happened here is that we got the string literal. We treated this whole thing on line 4 as a string by putting it inside double quotes. If we want to print the sum of 2 numbers or the difference like we did on line 2, we don't need those quotes around the data. And we'll go into more in-depth examples in a second. So we would just put 2 plus 2, no quotes around it, and then run the program. So the difference here on lines 4 and 5, 2 plus 2 is a string. So it's basically viewing it as a sentence. It's not going to do any math, and that's because the 2 double quotes are present. On line 5, we just put 2 plus 2 like normal. No double quotes, so it treats that as integers, and so it did the math for us and printed the result. Let's look at a couple more examples of that. So we're going to use, we're going to create some variables, and we're going to create a word variable that stores the word pizza in it. And we're denoting that this is a string with the double quotes. And then we're going to create a number variable, and we're going to store 16 in the number. So 16 doesn't have quotes because we're treating it like, in this case, it's an integer because it doesn't have a decimal point after it. And then we're going to test printing this in two different ways. So if I use print and I do the double quotes around the variable name here, it's going to print exactly what appears between those double quotes. But if I wanted to print the value of what's stored in that variable, I would just put the variable name between the parentheses. So let's run that real quick and see a first example. So you can see line 8, the word is between the two double quotes, so that's what's going to print out. It's not going to tell us what's stored in there. If I want to print what's stored in our variable, I need to just add the variable name in between the two parentheses, and it will print that. So we printed word because we asked for the literal string, the actual thing between the quotes, and then on 9 we got the value because we asked it to print the value stored in the variable. If you wanted to combine this, you could do something like word equals or word holds. And then remember, like we did above, we just did a comma. Let's see if that works. So word holds pizza. I guess we don't need those spaces. It looks like it adds this extra space. So the next one we want to test out is printing the number. So it's going to be the same thing. So if you print num in between two double quotes, you're going to get num. And if you print num without the quotes, you're going to get the variables, the actual value stored in the variable. So you can see here we have num and 16. So Python, like most text coding languages, are pretty picky about their syntax, and it does affect what prints or what works when you're doing it. So you'll just kind of pick up on this with practice. And these are some pretty basic errors that even the most experienced programmers will still make because they're typos. They're typos. You're on autopilot when you're coding, and you do something silly, and then it will take you hours to figure out what you did. So the compiler can only help you so much. Because if you saw like you saw on line 4, we didn't do anything wrong. The compiler didn't pick that up because that wasn't any kind of a technical error. That was a user error. So if you had wanted 4 to print, you would have had to go back and assess why it didn't work. And same for anything we did on lines 6 through 13. If we had wanted one thing to print over the other and it hadn't worked, we would have had to go back and look at why it didn't work like that. So there's an adventure mode on here. I encourage you guys to try it out. It's extra practice like what we just did. Pretty much everything we just did you should be able to do. You should be able to figure out in the adventure mode. And that's going to be it for today besides that. So I hope to see you guys next time at our live sessions if you're able to make it. Those are from 4 to 5, Mondays and Wednesdays, and they will continue like that throughout the school year. Have a great day.